All right. So again, welcome. Today you have joined the Community Data Watch Friday. It is June 18th, I think. I don't even know for sure. But today I know we're talking about home energy vulnerability in Halton. And this is a monthly event that we have. For those of you who are not familiar with community development in Halton, just to share with you that connecting community is what we do. And we like to say that we do that through a couple different ways. One is through Volunteer Halton, which provides workshop series in our annual Congress event coming up in November, November 5th. Early bird registration is open. National Volunteer Week, and so much more. We also have a volunteer portal helping connect citizens and nonprofits and grassroots groups together so that we can all contribute our gifts and skills in community to make Halton a great place to live. We also pay attention to important data, and these are just some quick information for you around the growing poverty in Halton, but this helps us tell the story, and we like to connect our community to the data story that is out there. So that comes in the form of numbers as well as sharing actual stories from people in community. Our social planning team does research on all sorts of things, and most recently, we've been involved in belonging with our kids network. Have a initiative on homelessness and encampments. Part of some of our peer researchers are in the house today, which is exciting. So thanks for being here. We have an awesome team of folks who are working alongside of us in community. This publication that I'm going to be sharing a bit about is we are grateful there. It is funded by the regional municipality of Halton. I see Juan is in the house, one of our partners from the region, and also the United Way. So again, huge thanks to the support, and I'd like to thank some peer reviewers, of which I also see somebody I think who peer reviewed in our call today. So every single one of our documents has been reviewed by usually about at least 5, if not more, folks in community that bring a content expertise to the work that we do. All right, so here we go. This is kind of interesting data, and it's been spurred on by some requests, and in particular from the city of Burlington. We've written about this in the past, many years ago, probably 2016, maybe. Richard, is that right?
Yep.
And so this is a refresh on that, and people are quite interested, and so yeah, and it's turned out to be quite an interesting look at what's happening in community. So the data comes from StatsCan Census of Population from 2021, as you'll often hear from us, which is our most current reliable source of data from a population perspective, and also the Canadian Social Survey on energy use. Home energy poverty. So what is it? So this is maybe a new term for many folks. So when households spend a disproportionate share of their income on home energy needs, such as electricity, natural gas, and other fuels, it affects the health, comfort, and financial security of residents. So in Canada, a common threshold for home energy poverty is when a household spends 6% or more of their after-tax income on energy costs. So that's sort of this benchmark that we're going to be referring to throughout the presentation. That's 6% or more. So again, some limitations is there's no universally accepted threshold for measuring energy poverty, but there are a growing number of jurisdictions that use the 6% benchmark, and it's based on the understanding that most Canadian households spend less than 3% of after-tax income on home energy. So spending more than twice that amount indicates a high energy burden. And it's been championed by like Canadian urban sustainability practitioners, Efficiency Canada, the City of Toronto, and they've been helping, that help to identify households that are experiencing moderate but meaningfully energy-related financial stresses. So these are the folks who have been writing about that and championing this threshold that we're talking about at 6%. So a key limitation here is that measuring home energy poverty, I'm using census data, is a treatment of energy costs for renter households and households not reporting energy costs separately. So many rental units, particularly apartments, some condos, have utilities such as electricity and heating, including in the monthly rent. So in those cases, StatsCan can't produce a report that separates their utility costs, meaning that those households aren't included in these calculations. So we think then as a result, most folks would agree that there will be some folks who are excluded, underestimating the true prevalence of home energy poverty among renters, especially in municipalities like Burlington, where renters make up 25% of all households, the highest proportion in Halton Region. So that is a barrier, so that the folks who, their rent is all inclusive and they're not, we're not able to separately state out what the energy costs are. So just a thing for us to flag, and I'll note it again later. Home energy burden. So here we go. Among households that separately report, so we're able to draw the report here, separately report energy costs. The majority spent between 3 and 6% of their after-tax income on energy, with 62% of all Halton residents doing that. So 62% of all Halton residents fall between 3 and 6. 27% spent less than 3%. And this is that means that 10.6% of households were considered home energy poor for Halton as an average, spending more than 6%, which is that threshold. 4% of households spent over 10%, which is about 2%, 2.1%, exceeding 15% of their income and energy costs. Halton Hills had the highest rate of home energy poverty at 13.2%, with nearly 5.1% of households spending over 10% and 2.5% spending over 15%. So that's really an interesting, I'm sitting here in Acton today, so really thinking about Halton Hills and what's happening in Halton Hills. So maybe some conversation and insights from community as we go through. So again, Halton Hills had this highest rate. Burlington had the highest rate of proportion of households in the 3 to 6% range, suggesting a concentration of households just below the energy poverty threshold, so just hovering. And again, reminding you that Burlington also has the highest proportion of renters whose energy payments may not be included in these measures. So something just for us to flag that might be a hidden piece. But we think that the data sort of underscores the variability of energy cost burdens across municipalities, and probably points to the need for some targeted interventions as we consider what do we do with this data. So home energy poor households in the GTA. So, Richard looked at this data and thought this is probably worth us having a look at as we compare ourselves to other regions that are close by. So between 2016 and 2021, the percentage of households in the GTHA were spending 6 or more of their after-tax income on all home energy. They saw a notable decline across all the regions. So the energy poor households were declining between those two census periods. It was also reflected in the overall Ontario average, which dropped from 22.3% to 13.9% in 2021. So that's pretty significant. So, you're going to be saying, why on average in Ontario and in all the regions around us are we starting to see this decline? It's a good news story. So what does that look like? Here's some, but we're going to talk about other things too later. Some of the reasons might be because of some pretty, I wanted to flag some advocacy efforts from the low-income advocacy network programs, such as the Ontario Electricity Support Program that if you read, it might be related to as the OESP, the Low Income Energy Assistance Program, the LEAP program, Fair Hydro Plan, and responding to growing public uproar over hydro rates in 2017. For those of you who are, I remember that. And so those might be some of the policy, when policy pieces get put into play. We'll talk about another reason too, possibly. Here's a map, as we're known to do here. Richard's provided a map for us. Again, Richard, feel free to pop in here and share anything. But when examining the percentage of households in energy poverty, a similar trend emerges with most census tracts. 67% have fewer than 12% of households experiencing energy poverty, suggesting the moderate levels of burden across the region. However, the tracts with the higher rates of household in energy poverty, ranging from 12 to 32%, make up about 31% of all the census tracts that are largely concentrated in rural Halton, which is not uncommon when you look at other areas across Ontario, and Oakville. Richard, is there anything else you wanted to add to about this map?
The only thing is just, as I said, in the index, I have both the number of household and also the percentage household. So when you look at the map, you have to look at those two numbers together
Right,
because an area may have a very high number of households or a very low number of percentage of households.
right. Thank you. Great. Thanks, Richard. So a couple things. So role of energy costs and income support. So home energy poverty is determined by the proportion of after-tax household income spent on home energy costs. And there's two core variables that drive changes in the indicator. So the amount of households that spend, the amount that households spend on home energy and the amount of income available to them, specifically after-tax income, makes sense. So households that paid only for fuel spent an average, so like say gas, natural gas, um, spent an average of 1,333, while those paying for electricity spent 1,620, and those that use both fuel and electricity spent 3,154 annually. So that the fuel cost has a big bearing on that. And home energy costs may have risen during this period. For sure, during these two periods, due to fuel price increases and rising utility rates. But the calculation of home energy poverty uses the 2020 after-tax income as a denominator. So the piece that plays it out. So the temporary spike in income that came from government relief programs like CERB during COVID may have artificially reduced the share of income spent on energy, resulting in a lower measure rate of energy poverty. So just like we've seen in other reports that Community Development Halton has shared over the last year or year and a half, we've seen declining poverty rates during the census tract because of COVID, income interventions, some through CERB in particular. So even in cases where actual energy expenditures increased or remained high, people's income actually went up because of those government programs to help ease the burden of COVID on income across the country. And so post-COVID will be really interesting. CDH will wait for that next census run of data. It'll be a while before we can compare that again, but it'll be a banner year when we start to get all of that data in to make a comparison to the post-COVID world. So home energy and housing type. So we have home energy poverty and home varies significantly by housing type, with single detached homes accounting for the highest proportion of energy poor households overall. So apartment households experience significantly lower energy poverty rates across Halton, with the regional average at 5.9%, and Burlington recorded the lowest at 4.6%. Followed by Milton and then Oakville. Remembering though that some apartments and condos have utility costs built into the rent. So I just want to flag that again for you. So that might not tell the whole story. However, Halton Hills does stand out with a notably high energy poverty rate at 12.1% among apartment dwellers. Really interesting again. More than double the regional average, and that might affect poor building quality, limited insulation, lower income tenants, and older rental stock in that community. These are some thoughts, but again, if we've got some Halton Hills folks here or people with some experience in the community, it might be interesting to hear what you have to say. It will be interesting, not might, but will. Home energy poverty in a period of construction. Also an interesting number in here. So houses built before 1980 consistently show the highest rate of energy poverty. In particular, Halton Hills and Burlington stand out with 29% of pre-1960 houses and 33% of the houses built between 61 and 1980 houses being very energy poor, even in Oakville and Milton, where the rates are generally lower. So older houses are showing disproportionately higher levels of energy burden compared to new builds. So I think we make some assuming that is about building codes, insulation standards, energy efficient technologies, windows, all of those those things. And then notably, Milton deviates from the general trend in 2001 to 2010 category, where it has this high share of energy poor households at 34%, indicating maybe issues around rapid suburban development or transitional building. I actually, lived in Milton during part of this time as they were ramping up to build and grow so quickly. So those are some guesses. Again, would love some insights from community on this. Poverty status among home energy and poor households. Energy poor households. So a key dimension of home energy poverty is the extent to which it overlaps with household income poverty. So 39.8% of home energy poor households in Halton Region were also identified as low income, living in poverty, according to the low income measure. So that points to the fact that this is an issue about income and economic vulnerability. It's also important to know that 60% of energy poor households are not classified as low income, pointing to an affordability issue. So, we're living in this time where lots of people are experiencing a ton of challenges with inflation and housing costs and incomes not keeping up to the cost of living. And so folks who are not technically classified as living in below the low income measure are still experiencing affordability issues in paying their bills. So, and here we have, a breakdown by municipality, proportion of low income home energy poor households in Halton Region. And you see that Oakville with that 46.5%, sort of unfortunately topping the charts there. Just wanted to flag, so important. One of our peer reviewers is a someone who is their agency provides the low income energy assistance program. So I just thought it might be a really good time right now just to share about LEAP. It's designed to help low income households who are struggling to pay their electricity bill. Eligible customers can receive up to $650 in emergency assistance for their electricity bills, or $780 for homes heated with electricity. And so I did do a scan. So Michelle Knoll at Oak Park made sure that you would have this information. And so she supports folks in the Oakville area. It did look to me when I did a scan that this program is also available through the town in Halton Hills, which obviously I think we need to flag. And how do we increase the use of this for those folks in Halton Hills who are struggling? I couldn't find a reference to agencies who are providing this in Burlington and Milton. So I was hoping maybe somebody here on the call might have more information, but I scanned and scanned online and I couldn't find that information. So love community wisdom there. So just getting to implications of all this data, well, 10% or 10.6% of households that report energy payments are classified as energy poor. The burden is not evenly distributed. Energy poverty disproportionately affects households in older homes, single-attached or semi-detached dwellings, and those living in rural areas or without recent energy efficiency upgrades. It's particularly accurate in Halton Hills, or acute in Halton Hills, which consistently reports the highest rates across several of the dimensions. Most concerning is the intersection of home energy and poverty and income poverty. So in 2021, nearly 40% of all energy poor households in Halton were also low income. And in Oakville, this proportion is even higher, at 46.5% of energy poor households living in poverty. These households face multiple compounding vulnerabilities with high energy costs, limited income, and likely barriers to accessing supports or investing in energy saving home improvements. And then this has an impact on other social determinants of health when people are experiencing these kinds of economic stresses. So while the 2021 data based on income for the year 2020 reflects a period when the pandemic-related income supports were still in effect, poverty in Halton has since worsened. So Halton's poverty rate rose from 9.4 12.4 in 2020 to 12.8 in 2022, based on tax filer data, following the phase out of those emergency benefits like CERB, amid rising inflation at the same time as those CERB benefits were being discontinued. This suggests that the share of energy poor households also experiencing income poverty may even be higher today, making the issue even more urgent for community response and policy action, we believe. So some of the actions that we came up with, and we will be really keen to hear what you come up with today. Expanded targeted tax incentive energy retrofit programs with tax incentives for low-income households, particularly those in older homes and rural areas. Perhaps increases access to utility relief programs and ensure eligibility criteria are inclusive of both renters and owners. I know we've had some really great conversations with the city of Burlington folks, and it's like, where do we go to share this information about the programs that are available? How do we have targeted approaches to get this information, and finding those kind of assets in communities, those places where people are gathering, or feel trusted, trusted spaces where you can share information. So improving education efforts regarding the LEAP program, and incorporating energy poverty into local housing and climate strategies, recognizing its impact on both affordability and resilience. Advocating for improved data collection, especially for renters whose energy costs are embedded in rent and thus excluded from traditional measures. And partnering with community organizations, again, to identify vulnerable households and provide outreach, education, and support to apply available programs. So yeah, how do we share this information? How do we get it to the right places? Who do we need to advocate to for more, and how can we work together to do a better job of sharing all of this? So that's me stopping talking, and I'm gonna stop sharing in a second. But we're gonna, I hope you just stick with us. Don't be afraid. We're gonna go into some small groups to talk about what does this data mean, what stood out for you today in the data that was shared, and what opportunities can you think of as a group? And also, do you have insights about those Halton Hill numbers, in particular? What opportunities can you think of as a group to address energy poverty? And they could be individual or collective action. So we're going to create safe space for you